The order came through at 3340, ship's time, which is the hour when the corridors smell like recycled air and old coffee, and nobody is walking them, except the people who have to be. I was in the med bay inventorying field compression kits when Lieutenant Orvano knocked on the frame and told me we had a diversion. I asked where. He read it off his pad. I had to ask him to repeat the sector coordinates twice because they were so far off our troll arc that I thought the pad had a display fault. It didn't. I put the compression kits away and went to ask the captain what was happening. Captain Saravane had been running this vessel for 11 years, which is a long time, though not the longest. The Veldrith carrier. That is what we call her. The Veldrith carrier. Because the hull designation was painted over before my grandfather was born, and the crew that named her after themselves is 3 crews removed from us, has been on continuous deep patrol for longer than anyone aboard has been alive. She was built for the long arcs. She never received a stand-down order. At some point, Earth simply forgot to send one, or decided a ship in the deep arcs cost less to run than to recall, or wrote the recall and lost it in a filing migration. The captain has a theory for each of those possibilities and does not hold a strong opinion among them. She says it doesn't matter. The ship runs. We run with it. I asked her about the diversion. She said, Earth's deep grid array decoded a distress beacon last week. Took the array 6 days to parse because the encoding was old. Very old. Pre-compact standard. The authentication header alone is 8 centuries out of date. I did the arithmetic, I said. The beacon has been traveling for 800 years, give or take. It was aimed at the Valdecine seat, their empire's central relay, which hasn't existed in roughly 400 years. The signal drifted. When the empire's relay went dark, there was nothing to absorb it. It just kept going. She set her pad face down on the console. We're the closest vessel. We're being diverted. That was the whole briefing. I went back to the med bay and spent the remaining transit hours reading what Earth's array had forwarded about the colony world in question. The file was thin. Melvara IV, a Valdecine colonial settlement founded 812 years ago, original population estimated at 14,000. The founding generation had sent the beacon during an external siege in the colony's 3rd year. Siege ended, one way or another, and the colony survived. It had been self-administering for 8 centuries. No mutual aid compact, Terran contact, no formal anything. They had sent one distress call, once, and it had gone to their own empire, and nobody had come, and they had figured it out themselves. The beacon had never been cancelled. You couldn't cancel a signal once it was in transit. It had just kept moving through the void, old and quiet and patient, for 800 years, until it found us. We came in low over the colony's emergency landing field at local mid-morning. The field was old packed earth and stabilized gravel, 4 permanent structures around the perimeter, and a mobile medical station set up near the southern trees line that did not look like it had been mobile in some time. There was a quarantine banner strung between 2 of the perimeter structures. Yellow. Quarantine yellow is quarantine yellow in most traditions, I have found. The planetary governor was waiting at the base of the ramp when I came down with the first supply cases. Her name, I would learn later, was Thessanavori, and she had governed Melvara IV for 9 years, and had the posture of someone who had learned to carry a great deal without showing it. She was watching me come down the ramp with an expression I did not immediately have a word for. Relief. Relief would have been warmer, not fear. Something between the two. The careful face of someone who has received an answer to a question they stopped asking a very long time ago. She said, "You decoded the beacon." I set the cases down on the gravel. Earth's array did, yes, 8 days ago. She said nothing for a moment. Then, it was my ancestors who sent it. The founding council, in the 3rd year. The Valdecine siege. They sent it to the seat because that was the protocol. All emergency traffic to the seat. The seat dispatches response. The seat never responded. The siege broke on its own. The council assumed the beacon had failed to transmit. She looked past me, at the Veldrath carrier, sitting on the field, with her hull plates, showing 4 distinct generations of repair. They did not know it was still moving, I said. It was still moving. She looked back at me. Something settled in her face. Not quite grief, but in the neighborhood of it. The particular feeling, I think of. Learning that something you assumed had been lost was in fact simply delayed, and that the delay was so long that the original emergency it was sent for is now history, and the people who sent it are gone, and the world has moved on without the answer. And then the answer arrives. I had no words for that either. I had compression kits, and a full pharmaceutical case, and 17 units of broad-spectrum antivirals, which was what her quarantine banner was advertising a need for. I handed her the manifest. She read it. She said, "How did you know we needed antivirals?" I said. "We didn't. We read your quarantine marker coming in, Doctor." Pelavar pulled our pharmacological reserve on approach. This is what we had. She looked at the manifest for another moment. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket. We spent 4 days on Melvara IV. The outbreak was a respiratory strain. Old colony worlds sometimes turn up strains that have been running through isolated populations for generations, drifting slowly enough that the population's immune response can't quite catch it. Our antivirals were not a perfect match, but they were close enough to break the secondary complications, which were the part that was killing people. Dr. Pelavar worked out of the mobile medical station and trained 3 of the colony's own medics on the administration protocol. I ran supply logistics and kept the manifest updated and ate most of my meals standing up at a portable table outside the station. The governor came to find me on the 3rd evening. The light on Melvara IV at evening is amber green, which sounds wrong but which is actually very pleasant once you're used to it. She sat down across from me and put a data chip on the table. She said, "My office has been reviewing the Colonial Archive, the Founding Council's original distress log. The one they filed the night they sent the beacon." I looked at the chip, she said. The log entry ends with a note. The council secretary wrote in the margin that she had calculated the signal's estimated transmission time, and that if it ever reached the seat, and the seat ever dispatched response would arrive approximately 12 years after the siege ended. She paused. She found that number funny in a grim way. She wrote, "Then, we will have solved it ourselves or we won't have survived to need it," I said. She was right about the first part. Yes. She picked up the chip and turned it over in her fingers. 800 years late is not 12 years late. But the principle is the same. She set the chip down again. "I am going to file a first contact report with the Valdecine Colonial Authority. They don't have jurisdiction over us anymore. They haven't, not functionally, about 4 centuries. But the protocol exists and I will follow it. Report will note that a veteran responded to Melvara IV's original distress beacon. 812 years after transmission, provided medical assistance." I said. "That's an unusual report to file," she said. "Yes." Then, after a moment, "I will also note that the beacon worked." I flew back to the Veldrath carrier that night. The captain was in her chair, on the bridge, when I came through, running the pre-departure checklist at her usual unhurried pace. I gave her my field summary. She read it, asked 3 questions about the antiviral administration outcomes, and noted the answers in the log. Then she closed the log and said, "Earth is going to want to know how to open a formal contact channel with that colony," I said. "Probably," she said. "We should pass the recommendation that someone send a more modern ship." She said it without looking up from the console. I thought about the Veldrath carrier's hull plates and the 4 generations of repair visible from the landing field. I thought about a signal moving through the dark for 800 years, patient and indifferent, till it found the one vessel close enough to answer. I said, "We could also recommend they remember to send stand-down orders in a timely manner." The captain looked up then. She didn't say anything, but she made a note.